I'm presenting today on something I implemented at my university, Compose the Day, inspiring creativity and building techniques in composers through daily activities. A little bit about my background. As Linda mentioned, I have my bachelor's in music education, and then I have a master's in theory pedagogy. Both of those experiences made me really passionate about pedagogy and trying to refine how we teach things, especially when it comes to composition. I teach at Bradley University, and I just want to give you the framework for the university there. So we offer a Bachelor of Music in Composition, which is kind of unique to a smaller, mid-sized university. In addition to that, we have 6 other music majors. Minors and non-majors are allowed to participate in lessons. So I have, for instance, a kinesiology major in comp lessons right now. Because of this opportunity, my composers come to the board with a very diverse skill set and a very diverse set of experiences when they're composing. So here's the scenario. Picture this, if you will. You're a brand new university composition instructor, professor. You walk into the gates, approaching your first job right out of your doctorate. That was me, of course. I had so many students who, on the first days that I met them, they were telling me they wanted to be the film composer, the band composer with these, social media followings. They were going to be the choral composer. They had these huge aspirations, and I thought, oh my goodness, these students are going to do such great things. I can't teach them. They're already past me. But as it so happened, I went months without some of them even composing a note. They were in this rut where they wouldn't write any music. They would come to their lessons and we'd practice writing together. We'd analyze, try to build them up with some techniques, but they just wouldn't write on their own. And what I found out, it wasn't just a culture established in the composition studio, but in our university, there was a culture not built for practicing even. Our practice rooms were quite silent. So this is really something I had to overcome. And of course, me being a problem solver, there were many solutions I tried. So right off the bat, I brought these students to lessons and I said, bring me your schedules. We will block out times and you will find those composition times. I still do this, but there's the old saying, you can lead a horse to water, but you can't make them drink. So they were supposed to compose, but they still didn't. Next, I tried a more collaborative approach. My students laughed at me for this term, but I assigned them accountability buddies. So these were their friends, their peers, that would hold them accountable for composing. So they were supposed to ask each other every day, hey, did you compose today? Or are you working on your music? Of course, they weren't so much into the collaboration idea. So then I got wiser, smarter. I adjusted my syllabus and gave more weight to weekly progress in the grading system, but that still didn't convince some of them to compose. So I got even smarter. I went and researched the music department handbook, and I found out that the department handbook suggested that these students, if they're enrolled in an hour lesson, were to be composing 2 hours a day. So I was like, that's it, it's in writing, you're signed up for this 2 hours a day, right? Of course, they didn't do that either. So I got even smarter. I asked them every week, like, are you practicing? And or are you composing? And they'd say, yeah, I think I was about 5 hours. But I didn't see any work for that. So I got even smarter. I must have took a long time to get smart. I gave them practice logs. So every day they recorded, I composed 2 hours this day, 0 hours these next 4 days. Then they saw that reflected in their grade. So then they started maybe embellishing the truth and still not producing a lot. So I got to the point where I'm like, email me. I'm going to read your email at the end of the day. Tell me what you worked on today. But at that point, I thought, this is too much. I can't see these emails from all 10 of my composers every day and keep track of them. So I needed a better solution to get them composing and making progress. So that's where this idea of Compose the Year came up. I wanted to create daily activities that focused on building compositional fluency. I wanted to narrow it down enough that they could concentrate on just a specific technique and not be overwhelmed by I have a blank sheet of paper or I have a blank file on my computer. We needed to narrow it down so they could have a manageable goal, and each day just focus on that goal. I wanted to build into this 2 scaffolded difficulties. So this comes from pedagogical practices where they increase in difficulty as we progress. I considered some factors, including accountability, so these were factored into their grade. I wanted it to be manageable as far as time was going. So I wanted it to be about 30 minutes per day because I still needed them to make progress on a bigger project. These were just little studies or little exercises. I tried to give it a gamified approach, so I had a winner at the end of every semester who did the most. So we now in our studio have 2 distinguished composers. And what I liked about this is I was able to log on and give them immediate feedback every day. So the first time one of my students composed for vocal setting, I was able to say, hey, actually your lyrics go below this staff. Just really fast feedback where they could change it. I had 3 really big objectives that I wanted this to accomplish. So first of all, I needed them to build a routine, getting into that habit of composing every day. And it move away from this idea of I can only compose when I have inspiration. That was a big dilemma that they faced. I needed to introduce new knowledge to them and I want to grow as a composer. So many of them hadn't worked with 20th century techniques or extended techniques or DAWs. So I built those into the topics that were covered. And then finally, I wanted these to be open enough that the students could continue them if they loved what they wrote. So just a little study that then could be developed into a bigger project, maybe for the new music concert that we host. I'm going to go through these really quick because I want to present some student responses to you, but I took into consideration many pedagogical factors. So Bloom's taxonomy of learning says that students learn the most when they can implement it through creativity or composing in our instance. So they learned these concepts by creating, not just being told, here's what a whole tone scale is. Again, I used educational scaffolding, which is that systematic sequencing of content and tasks. One other component of educational scaffolding says that you have peer and teacher support. And in a community like this, it worked out perfectly. I used educational gamification, and this is especially critical to our Gen Z learners who have grown up with games their whole lives, right? Research shows that through gamification, you have skills, knowledge, and abilities with higher retention rates. So if they had an activity where they were doing this, where it was a competition perhaps, they could retain that idea longer. There's a self-determined motivation theory saying basically that students won't be motivated to compose or practice unless their psychological needs are met. So you have to find that balance. There's a ton of research on this. And one thing that I thought would help motivate my students is that their posts would be visible to the entire studio. So the studio would see and be able to access what they were working on, whereas in lessons, that's not always the case until the master class or studio class come across the board. For routine theory, there's a ton of research on this where the money is, right? So in sports research, there's a ton of research basically saying that if you build the routine, you learn faster because you're modeling behaviors continuously. There's not as much of that research done in music or composing so far. But just introduced to me yesterday by Tony was Julia Cameron's morning pages, where higher artistic creativity is unlocked through daily practice. And that fits perfectly, although it was for writing, into composing. Last but not least, my students, I felt like, were often challenged by this idea of the composer genius myth. Evan Williams has written a great blog about this, and my students, a couple of them even said, I'm never going to be Mozart. Why am I trying? I can't even compose because I'm not going to be Mozart. But Evan says a few great things here, like although some factors are out of our control, no one receives extreme success without hard work. And composition does require skills, and you have to learn skills. So those factors went into this. We implemented this. What I did, requirement-wise for grading, it was either a complete or incomplete. I didn't judge them on quality. I posted 7 times a week, and to get a full grade, 10 out of 10 had to post 5 times out of that week, so Monday through Friday, perhaps. Weekends were optional. If they did 4 out of 7, it was an 8 out of 10. 3 out of 7, 6 out of 10, 2 out of 7, 4 out of 10, etc. Now, I decided I wanted to do an electronic delivery of the prompts. I debated using my learning management system at my university, and what turned me actually away from it is I had different sections of composers, so I would have to do it separately. Because of privacy acts, they wouldn't let me combine them in my university. So I said, that's fine, I'll go to a website. Little did I know that this would work better because our prompts became visible to outside members of our community. So, for instance, when I had prospective students contact me, I said, hey, check out what my studio's doing, and they could participate that day that they visited campus. Also, music education majors would see their friends doing this and then also started taking part. Even better, when we have days such as like write for solo violin, the students would tell the violin players and tell the violin professor. So all these people started checking it out because it was now part of what they were trying to do, right? Playing violin pieces. So it worked better having it on a website rather than my learning management system. The website I used was Blogspot, but it also allowed me to pre-post these things. So I don't know about you, but during the week, I don't have a lot of time outside of grading, composing, and just teaching my courses. So even before the semester started, I pre-loaded these to appear every day at midnight. So those folks who were still up could already get a good start on the next day. And I factored them out for the whole semester. So I didn't exactly keep track of what post was coming next anymore, but I would check on it daily to see what our responses were. As we got further into this, I tried to make curricular connections. So when my students started learning about inventions in theory class, we'd cover that topic, and then the next week, I'd implement it into this blog. So they would compose their own invention over a series of 4 or 5 days. And then finally, once this really became a thing, I let the students generate their own prompts. So students that were interested in blues or jazz would do focused ideas on that, and then everyone would respond. I think this really gave us agency and license and ownership of the project. And when I posted those prompts that the students generated, I would say, this prompt was suggested by Carlos or David, and these students would really get excited when they saw their own material come across. So I put together a list of 160 prompts. If you want to use them yourself, there's a bit.ly there with the resource on it, and then there's a QR code in the top right that will take you to all the prompts that are generated. Below this, again, I wanted to focus on the individual techniques to build this fluency. So below in the 3 columns here, you have all the techniques I tried to divide up on. So for instance, rhythm, meter, they each have maybe 10 to 15 topics that are posted once every few weeks. So you're not doing a whole week of meter. Instead, you do a meter every 14 days or so. I have this QR code on multiple slides, so I'm going to come back to it and cruise ahead. So this is a screenshot of our blog from back in September. So as you see, on September 19th, we did affects. The students composed music to depict the color blue. I thought affects would be challenging because they were so open, but the students really enjoyed them. The next day, they did meter. So they composed 16 measures for a non-pitched instrument using mixed meters. And then the following day, melody. So as you can see, I tried to change up the topic to just maybe generate interest. You know, we didn't want to get bored of one certain topic. Now on this screen, this is taken from that handout that I gave you the QR code for. Here's our scaffolded prompts. So for instrumentation, we start basic. Compose for your own instrument. Upload a video of you playing it. And then we go to solo instruments. So write for violin, write for flute, write for trumpet. Eventually, we go down and build small chamber ensembles of close instruments, woodwinds, saxophones, percussion. Just an idea there, some examples. Finally, as we got really good at this, we started doing multi-day prompts. So these were mainly large segmented forms, so inventions, variations, rondo, 12-bar blues, verse, chorus. We would do multi-stanza vocal settings with accompaniment. So one day they would set the melody, the next day they would set the accompaniment, the next day they would set the next stanza, etc. So by the end of a week, they would have a substantial piece about maybe 3 minutes in length rather than 30 seconds. You can read through this. This is also on that handout I gave you, but this is basically a segmented large form on variations. So they one day compose an 8-measure theme, and then after that, they do 2 more variations in different styles, and then at the end of the week, they post the full piece. So that's basically the layout of the project, and I wanted to play some student examples for you really quick. This student was not a composition major. This is their 2nd year in music theory and as a music major, but they were a Bachelor of Arts in Music, double major in psychology. They played piano, had taken piano private lessons, but this was their very first semester in comp lessons. The prompt was compose 20 seconds of music to depict a chase scene. I asked these students to submit these. This was his favorite. He said he spent 3 hours on it because he added sound effects to it. So he had never done that, never even worked with a DAW. And here he is doing it for a Compose the Day prompt. lost my mouse. Yeah, I mean, the sound effects are what make it, right? He was so proud of it, and one of the students is like, "Where'd you get them?" So they talked all about this idea of how you can find these resources online and where they are for free. It was a great learning opportunity. Now, I asked another student to submit one, and he actually picked the exact same prompt. I don't know what the irony of that is, but it's great. This student is a composition major. This was his second year in school. He's a bass and percussion major as far as his instrument. And then he had no theory in high school, but did take some composition lessons when he was a high schooler. I'm going to skip the repeat for time's sake. So those, both very different, but the students were so excited about them. That was one of our best days. It was in February. Now here's a different one. This student was not a music composition major. They're a music education major, and they just started responding to these for fun. Their friends were talking about them in the lobbies, so they took part of them. They had never composed before. They did take AP Music Theory during high school, but other than that, this was really their first composition piece, and they just joined for fun. I'm going to move on for time's sake. So another prompt was revise and extend a previous response that you had. So this student, again, responded, not in the comp studio, and added a piano accompaniment to it and extended it. There it is there. We'll skip it for now. Lucky for me, this student said, I enjoyed this so much, I'm taking comp lessons. So this student actually just last month brought this in, extended. If you look at it, we now have phrasing, dynamics, articulations, parts where the piano and trumpet are playing separately. So they expanded it into this really great piece that is now becoming a movement of a new piece that they're starting. So a 3-movement piece for trumpet. This student was a senior music composition major, both performance and composition, played drum set, specialized in percussion. I asked him to send me something he really enjoyed, and he said, you know what? I had never written lyrics, and I didn't do much with voice text setting. So he enjoyed this one, even though it's just a little simple folk song with silly lyrics. So I just want to talk about a few evaluation. Oh, there we go. Thank you. Just want to talk about how this project ended up. So we did this over 32 weeks, 2 semesters of 16 weeks. 1 student completed all prompts for all 32 weeks. 3 additional students missed less than 5 prompts in 32 weeks. 2 additional students completed every single Monday through Friday prompts. I was able to make curricular connections with both the music theory and music history classes, which then got those instructors and professors on board with this project as well. Here's another great thing that came out of this. I always had material generated for lessons. So let's say they had a rough week. We went and looked at one of their old prompts that they liked. I didn't anticipate having studio growth out of this, but I had 3 students who joined just because they started doing these Compose the Day examples. Even better, I developed a really nice studio culture. So the composers would talk about this in the lobby, in our student lounge, and compare their responses. They had the most fun, they told me, when comparing lyrics or where they could write their pieces toward their colleagues, make a little joke out of it. One thing I hope to do as I proceed with this is integrate more self-reflection. I had added revision and extension, but I think there's an opportunity for them to reflect on what worked, what didn't work. I think there's a ton of ways this can be applied. It could be music theory classes, studio classes, guest lectures, comp lessons, obviously, even with adult learners or high school, middle school, elementary school students. these are so accessible if you read through the list. Finally, I want to finish up with what the students said about this. So they said on average, they spent about 25 minutes a day on these prompts. Some of them, 2 of them, said less than 5 minutes a day. They just knocked it right out of the ballpark. The shortest prompt, 5 to 10 minutes on average. Longest prompt, 45 to 60 minutes on average. 2 students let me know once they spent 3 hours on it. That was this one with the sound effects. And then another one, I asked them to write a hero theme. And a different student spent 2 hours on 20 seconds of music, but they said they loved them. It was well worth it. All but 1 student in my composition studio said it improved their daily time invested in composing. They said they wouldn't have composed as regularly without this. 2 students said they used it as a compositional warm-up. So they would warm up with it and then go on to their project. Another student said they used it as a creative break. So if they hit a wall with their own project, they would add this in just to keep the idea of composing. All students said they either learned or employed new techniques. So if they had known about whole tone scale, they had never composed with it before these prompts. And then their favorite prompts, they all loved doing affects. They thought it was fun. They were very open. They liked doing music that sounds like, for instance, we had music that sounds like bird sounds or music that sounds like a train. They really enjoyed that. They also loved writing their lyrics. I didn't anticipate that would become a thing, but they did it as a joke to each other, perhaps. They really liked talking about it. Their least favorite prompts, they hated doing form and multi-day prompts. And I guess that was if they missed a day, it was harder to make up. And they didn't exactly like the theory topics that weren't maybe so applicable to their interests anymore. The easiest prompts, they said, were for their solo instruments, meter, and rhythms. So again, on this last slide, you have the QR code there so you can have access to that. The bit.ly URL takes you to that as well. And then if you check out that last link there, that is all of our responses. So the students post basically an image and an audio mock-up of that. So you can take a look at what they responded if you're interested. But that's everything on composing the year. Thank you so much.
Thank you, that's great. Good questions? Yeah.
This is great for starters. I think it's a wonderful program. I was just out of curiosity, and you might have said it. I was looking through your QR code, so I might have missed it. But have you considered integrating like the performance aspect of your university in this as well? Because one thing I've noticed that really motivates students is when they have a performance opportunity or like an actual instrument playing that. So like, yeah. A lot of the pieces can be played easily by other performers, so get the other students involved.
So it wasn't through this project, but especially during COVID when we weren't having guests come to campus, I had my university professors play pieces. So for instance, our violin teacher did a reading session of 3-minute solos for violin, 3 minutes or less. And we did the same thing with our piano professor. So we do this, and I think I could absolutely integrate it with this, but I haven't yet. So there you go, I will next. Thank you.
Cool, hi, I'm Jimmy.
Nice. Hello.
One thing that was really cool about this was you started the project as a way of sort of formalizing how your students go about spending their time. And so the project was to make something that was pretty formalized, but then a lot of what seems so successful about it is the fact that other people could participate in an informal way. So my question is, do you think that the formal aspect of it is still essential to the project, or is this something that you could just like do with a group of friends and there's no expectation of it like being for a grade for anyone?
That's a great question. So I actually stopped, we did this last year, so 32 weeks of it, and we have not done it again in a formal way. It's no longer part of their grade as far as the response. So I think absolutely, and I have students who would continue doing it if I kept posting. They would love to do it. I think the best thing to come out of this was community. So they talked about their music, and that wasn't something that happened before, where they were actively telling, hey, look what I just wrote for this. Or check this out, let me respond to what that person wrote. So I think an informal, collaborative group could absolutely take this on. You know, even us, if we formed a professional group of, you know, composers, we could do this ourselves and compare how we responded and what was different and what we took away from it. Absolutely. I think again, this has so many applications available for it.
Before you ask a question, could you please say who you are so we can get to know one another? Next.
My name is Walt. At the beginning of your presentation, I was kind of shocked because you said that you had students who were hesitant to compose. And like, I'm thinking these are composition majors, right? And they don't
Right.
want to, like, I have some suspicions, but why do you think that is, that they didn't want to actually do the thing that they were in school to do?
I have many suspicions, but obviously I was new to the program, and I think that there was some sort of culture established before I was there, and perhaps maybe this is a thing in many universities where maybe the instructor just needs to fill up their studio with numbers, right? I mean, we're all about teaching loads, and I wonder if that was it, and I just don't think there maybe was accountability before. And I can't speak to it because I wasn't there, but when I got there, like I said, the first day I met these students at the music meet and greet, they were saying, I'm going to be the next big fill in the blank. And I was like blown away, but then I didn't get any work from them.
I'm thinking maybe also, like, they have this conception, I'm going to be the next, whatever, but maybe like they didn't understand the steps of getting from here I am undergrad
Mm-hmm.
and I've written some stuff to doing that. And I think that maybe like there's some fear of like, if I try something right now, it's not going to be great, so I'm not going to do it until I have this, lightning bolt from heaven giving me, the great American symphony.
Right.
So I think, so I think it's great that you have them, like, the only way to get better at something is to do it.
And practice it.
Yeah, and
yes.
so you have to do it. So, and you have to write the bag songs before you can write the good songs.
Absolutely.
And
I think perhaps along with what you said, Walt, they didn't have the tools to be what they wanted, right? They just hadn't spent the time developing those tools or the toolbox of techniques. And this gave them a way by breaking it into those, I think there's like 24 topics we cover, to build that familiarity with those ideas.
Great, thank you so much.
Thank you.